The morning light over London was pale and watery, a typical winter sky that did nothing to warm the ancient stones of Kensington Palace. Inside her private apartment, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood by the window, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. The palace, usually a bustling hive of private secretaries and diligent staff, felt unnervingly still. It was the stillness that comes before a storm. She had felt it in her bones for weeks. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, a whispered conversation that halted too abruptly when she entered a room. The title she carried was heavy, but the weight she felt today was different. It was the burden of knowledge. For years, she had played the game. She had smiled, waved, and walked 3 steps behind. She had endured the snide remarks disguised as concern, and the carefully curated leaks to the press designed to portray her as an outsider, a commoner playing dress-up. The source of those leaks had never been a mystery to her. They had originated from the same aristocratic corner of the royal ecosystem that had always viewed the Middleton family with a mixture of disdain and fear. Camilla, the queen consort, had never quite hidden her belief that Catherine was simply not worthy of the crown that would one day rest on her head. But Catherine was not the same girl who had been sent home from St. Andrews with her tail between her legs in 2007. That breakup, orchestrated by whispers and doubts planted by those who thought they could control the destiny of the crown, had nearly broken her. She had fled to her mother Carol, who had refused to let her fold. Instead of hiding, Carol had pushed her daughter into the light. The images of a confident, laughing Kate at a boating regatta, in nightclubs living her life, were not just photographs, they were a declaration of war. It was a strategy that had worked, drawing William back to her side permanently. She had learned a valuable lesson then. In this family, passivity was not a virtue. It was a death sentence. Now, she was the mother of the future king, the linchpin of the monarchy's future. And she had spent the last decade quietly, patiently, building a network of her own. She had won over the Queen's household, charmed the private secretaries, and earned the loyalty of the staff who actually ran the palaces. While Camilla had spent her time consolidating her social standing, Catherine had been consolidating her power base. That she understood that information was the only currency that mattered behind these ancient walls. The information that had landed on her desk 2 days ago was the kind that could shatter marble. It had come from a source she had cultivated for years, a former aide who had served in Clarence House during the dark days when Camilla's influence was at its peak. The aide had arrived at Anmer Hall under the cover of a social visit, bringing with her a collection of documents that were not meant to see the light of day. They were not just about the past. They were about the present. Buried within the correspondence and memos was a thread connecting Camilla's inner circle to a series of decisions regarding the disgraced Prince Andrew. For months, the world had watched as the Epstein scandal metastasized. Threatening to consume the entire House of Windsor, Prince Andrew had been arrested, an unprecedented event in modern royal history, on suspicion of official misconduct and leaking state secrets. The released Epstein files painted a horrifying picture of depravity and connection. But what the public didn't know was that Camilla's camp had been quietly working to contain the damage, but not to protect the monarchy. They had been working to protect themselves, and in doing so, had made a catastrophic error. The documents Catherine now possessed suggested that certain figures close to Camilla had known the full extent of Andrew's entanglement with Jeffrey Epstein years before it became public. They had sat on the information, not out of loyalty to the Queen or the institution, but as leverage. It was leverage against Charles, who was deeply protective of his brother, and leverage against William, whom they viewed as a threat to their influence. They had gambled that the secrets would stay buried, or that they could control the narrative when they emerged. They had been wrong. Catherine looked at the papers spread on her antique desk. This was not about revenge. It was about survival. The monarchy was entering its most fragile period since the abdication crisis. Public trust was eroding. If it emerged that the Queen Consort's household had covered for Andrew to protect their own political interests, the institution would not survive. The only way to save it was to control the release of the truth, to ensure it came from a place of integrity and strength, not from a leaked court document or a tabloid exposé. She had told William that morning, and he had read the documents in silence, his jaw tight, a vein throbbing in his temple. He had seen the way Camilla operated up close. He remembered the pressure his father had put on him to make a decision about Kate all those years ago, pressure he now knew was fueled by Camilla's jealousy and classism. He had never forgotten, and he had never fully trusted her since. Now, her fingerprints were on something far more dangerous than a relationship breakup. They were on a potential national security disaster. "We have to go to Papa," William had said, his voice hoarse. "Together. We show him this, and we make him understand. She cannot be protected from this." Catherine had agreed, but she knew Charles. She knew his love for Camilla was genuine, a lifelong devotion that had cost him everything. And to confront him with this was to risk alienating him forever. But to stay silent was to risk the crown itself. The meeting was set for that afternoon. It would not take place in an office, but in a private sitting room at Buckingham Palace, away from the ears of secretaries and the eyes of courtiers. It would be just the four of them: the king, the Queen Consort, the Prince of Wales, and his wife. As Catherine dressed, she chose her outfit with care. It was not a statement of fashion, but of intent. A tailored navy blue dress, the color of authority, of the deep state. Simple pearl earrings, her hair pulled back severely. She looked every inch the future queen, a role she had been preparing for her entire adult life. When she met William in the corridor, he took her hand. His grip was firm, but she could feel the slight tremor in his fingers. He was nervous. Good. So was she. Nerves meant they understood the gravity of the moment. The drive to Buckingham Palace was short, but it felt like a procession through a foreign land. The streets were lined with tourists, unaware that inside the gilded carriage a revolution was brewing. They entered through the private gates, the familiar crunch of gravel under the tires sounding louder than usual. They were ushered into the sitting room. The king was standing by the fireplace, looking older than he had just months ago. The strain of the Andrew scandal, the cancer diagnosis he was battling privately, and the relentless pressure of the crown were etched into the lines of his face. Beside him, seated on a settee, was Camilla. She was impeccably dressed, as a picture of serene confidence. She offered them a tight, controlled smile. "William, Catherine, how lovely." Catherine returned the smile, but her eyes did not. They were cold, assessing. She saw the flicker of uncertainty cross Camilla's face before the Queen Consort looked away. "Thank you for coming," Charles said, his voice weary. "I assume this is about the Andrew situation. The statements from your office were helpful, necessary." "Partly, Papa," William said, stepping forward. He was carrying a slim leather portfolio. "But there's more. Something you need to see." He placed the portfolio on the low table in front of his father. Charles looked at it, then at his son. He opened it slowly. Inside were copies of the documents, emails, and memos. Catherine watched his face as he read. The color drained from it, now replaced by a mottled flush of anger and disbelief. He read for a long time. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant hum of London traffic. Camilla, sensing the shift in atmosphere, sat forward. "What is it, darling?" Charles did not answer her. He looked up at Catherine. "Is this verified?" "Every page, sir." Catherine said, her voice quiet but firm. The sources are impeccable. These aren't allegations. They're records. Charles turned to his wife. The look he gave her was not one of love, but of a man seeing a stranger for the first time. Did you know about this? Know about what? Camilla's composure was cracking. Charles, you're frightening me. Did you know that your people knew about Andrew's dealings with Epstein years ago? That they sat on intelligence that could have protected God knows how many victims because they were worried about the political fallout? For you? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Camilla's face went white. For a moment, the mask of the gracious queen consort slipped, revealing the woman underneath, calculating, cornered, and dangerous. That is a lie, she said, her voice low and sharp. A vicious lie concocted by people who have always wanted to see me fail, who have always resented my place in this family. Her eyes flicked to Catherine, the implication clear. Catherine met her gaze without flinching. These documents don't lie. They have dates, times, recipients. They show a concerted effort to suppress information that should have been handed to the authorities. This isn't about palace intrigue, Camilla. This is about criminality, and it has your name written all over it. How dare you? Camilla shot to her feet. You come in here with your commoner's ambition, and you dare to accuse me? I have given my life to this family. I have endured nothing but scorn and hatred, and I have done it for him. She pointed a trembling finger at Charles. You've endured scorn because of your actions, William interjected, his voice like ice. Not because of who you are, but because of what you've done. And now you've dragged us into a scandal that could end the monarchy. My mother is spinning in her grave. The mention of Diana was a raw, visceral blow. Camilla recoiled as if she had been slapped. Charles flinched, a deep pain crossing his features. It was a low blow, and William knew it. But this was war. Charles stood up, and moving away from them all towards the window. He stood with his back to them, his shoulders hunched. The weight of his crown, his brother, his wife, his son, it was all pressing down on him at once. Catherine, he said, his voice barely a whisper. What do you propose? It was the question she had been waiting for. He was asking her, not just as his daughter-in-law, but as the future of the house. He was acknowledging that her counsel, her judgment, mattered more than anyone else's in that room. She walked towards him, stopping a few feet away. We control the narrative, sir. We go public. Not with all of it, not yet. But we make it known that the palace has conducted an internal review, that we have uncovered serious lapses in judgment within the household, and that we are cooperating fully with the Metropolitan Police and Thames Valley Police in their investigation into Prince Andrew and any related matters. And what about... He gestured vaguely towards Camilla, still standing rigid by the settee. Her household is cleared out. Today, every aide, every secretary, every person complicit in this cover-up is gone. She issues a statement expressing her profound shock and disappointment that people she trusted would act in such a way, and pledges her full support for the king and the investigation. She throws them to the wolves, Camilla spat. And me? I become a puppet reading a script written by her? If you'd prefer, Catherine said, turning to face her fully, we can let the press have the documents. All of them. And we can let them write their own script. They'll be far less kind, I assure you. They'll paint a picture of a queen consort so obsessed with her own legacy that she was willing to protect a man accused of unthinkable crimes. The abdication crisis will look like a picnic compared to the firestorm that will follow. Camilla looked at Charles, her eyes pleading. Charles, you cannot let her do this. You cannot let them destroy me. Charles turned from the window. His face was a mask of grief and resolution. He looked old. He looked tired. But for the first time in a long time, he looked like a king.